Well, welcome to the Facebook Live today. I'm excited to have my good friend Colby Taylor join me today. Colby and I co-host together the the Dr. Kim and Colby Leadership Podcast.
Yep.
Some people think, what does that mean? We're talking about leading your family, leading as a man, leading to be the leader, the husband, the father, all those roles that God gives us. And we have a new episode that drops the second Thursday of every month, which means there will be a new one this month. And you can listen to them where you listen to all podcasts. But in this episode, we're talking about calling and how God led both of us, and we felt we were called to do what we're doing. How He led me to be a Christian counselor by just putting some people in my life that really spoke into me and helped me get some direction when I really didn't know where. I knew God wanted me to do something, but I wasn't sure where He wanted me to do. So, Colby, welcome.
It's good to be here, Dr. Kim, as always. So thanks for letting me join.
I don't think we've done something like this since the early COVID, when we were doing live stuff, trying to encourage people. And in those first 2-3 months of COVID, that was kind of crazy. And all of us were trying to figure out how do we help people and minister to people. And for some reason, we thought we could, and we did. So
yeah, I don't know if we got anything out of it, but we were still doing the live Facebook.
It was good.
I will say I don't miss those days. I enjoy doing it in person with you now. Again, back to the good old days. But this is fun to do as well, and just to connect with other people. I enjoy it.
So let's get into kind of for you just a little bit. What are some of the ways that God has showed you what He was calling you to do?
He spoke from a very loud, audible voice from heaven and said, "Colby, this is what you're going." Because that's what everybody has, right? That's yeah, it's a special connection I have there. I'm the only one that gets that typically, but I think everybody assumes, and you know as well as I do, that everybody assumes that you have some special connection to God, or He's specifically speaking audibly to you, and He doesn't do that with anybody else. At least I have sometimes had that same perception of others people that have heard from God, and He doesn't. I can't tell you that I've ever had an audible word from God specifically. It's typically through people, through relationships and conversations, and asking for wisdom and saying, "Hey, here's what we're thinking, we're doing. It's crazy, like leaving for starting the engaged life. This is a crazy jump. 6 kids, starting, no paycheck coming in. We're just going to jump and do something like this." And taking the time to seek the wise counsel, taking the time to spend, obviously you should be in your word every single day, spending time with that. That's a great place to start, because He uses that to communicate to you. And then my wife and I having to be on the same page. He speaks through my wife at times, and we're a partnership and we're a team. And so those are a few ways that He does that. I've had, and even the people that aren't encouraging or saying, "Hey, here's some challenges that you might want to face." I listen to those people a lot too, the ones that are not necessarily positive, like, "Hey, you go do it, high five, we're for you." I want to listen to people that say, "Hey, here's some challenges. Have you thought about these things?" I had a wise mentor friend of mine. He said, "Colby, do you realize the cost that this is going to take on your family and your marriage? Are you thinking through that? Are you prepared for this? Because I've done things like this before, Colby, and are you prepared for those things?" And it was a really good stop for me to say, no, I haven't probably thought as deeply about those things as I need to. And let's weigh that, at least be prepared for that, and understand what the cost. So those are a few things for me.
No, I think it's good. And I think, I agree. I've never had an audible voice from God. I think for me, it's a lot like you. It's other people that God has used to speak into me, especially when I decided to become a Christian counselor. And then I think sometimes I just feel something inside of me and it's not audible, but it's like, this is what you need to do, or this is what you don't need to do, or this, those kind of things. And so I agree. I think it's a combination of God, however He uses the Holy Spirit within us, the Scripture, and people that we trust, that God puts in our lives, that God uses to speak in. And it's hard to listen to some of the critical ones, but I think if you're somebody that you trust and value, then you want to listen to those people and
sure,
see what they have to say. So how did you know that it was God that was leading you? And you might talk to us a little bit about the games. It started out really as an engaged event. Now it's the engaged life. But what He was calling you, that it wasn't just your idea, that it was God leading you.
So I'd been working at a church here in where we're at locally, and had been there for 4.5 years, and just had kind of gone back and forth for basically a year. Man and I, she would be on the page like, let's do it. And then then I would be on the page and let's do it. And she wouldn't be. It would kind of go back and forth like that. So yeah, like one of us was like, let's make this crazy jump. Let's do it. And the other one would not. And we kind of went back and forth. And finally we connected together where we were on the same page. And then we did an engaged event in the spring of that year that we made a big jump, and it was, I think, 2019. So a big jump, and you were part of that, the very first one that we had. It was a lot of fun, success. We saw the need for it. And we're like, okay, God, is this kind of where you're leading? Is this what is needed? Do we need to do certain things like that? And is this where you're taking us? And so that was all that started the whole conversation. And like I said, you talk to you even as far as, hey, this is what we're thinking, and is this something we should do? But just seeking that counsel. But it definitely wasn't an easy decision, to say the least, and there was a lot of weighing a lot of the decision made. But that's kind of how we got to that spot.
Yeah,
and then we just jumped, and there was no looking back since.
And then the challenge, one of the big challenges, I think, especially with events, that the next year we had this thing called COVID, and people weren't doing events, and so I think it was a challenge. But you guys have persevered through that and looked for other ways to connect with people. And I love how you and Amanda connect individually with couples or small groups. You guys do such a good job of that, of really pouring into people that are engaged and want to be married.
We enjoy that. It's what we're supposed to be doing. There's and as well as I do, once God has asked you to do something, there's not a whole lot of arguing with him. You're like, okay, because he won't stop putting that in your heart and your mind. He'll just continue to do that. There's, who Eric Little was? I won't call him Liddell. Eric Little, famous athlete. Some people probably don't know him, but in the 1930s, he refused to run in the Olympics. Extremely good runner from Ireland, and was supposed to win, but he refused to run on Sundays because of his belief that Sunday was his day of Sabbath. Didn't run. Ended up great things happening. Ended up winning another race, and it was cool. The whole story is great, but he ends up retiring from that not too long after, and becomes a missionary in China. And he wrote something that I thought was just absolutely true. It says, if I believe something to be true, will I follow it even though it is contrary to what I want? Will I follow it if it means being laughed at by friend or foe, or if it means personal financial loss or some type of hardship? And those are the decisions that in the back of you need to be willing to ask yourself and realize that, hey, when you make something like this and you follow where God is leading you, that there's a good chance some of these are going to follow too. And are you willing to still take that step in regards to it? So I thought that was something that's really motivated me and inspired me here more recently. And
I think it's really good.
So it's good.
Plus,
and he knew
the movie and the song Chariots of Fire was awesome. Good stuff.
I've never watched it before. I guess I need to check it out. The story is incredible.
It's a great movie, and the guy who plays him does a great job. I don't think he plays himself. I think somebody plays him in it. It's been a long time ago when I saw it, but it's great. But I think it's so inspirational of how we stand on our faith and what God's calling us to do and our beliefs, and how God honors that when the world is saying, what are you doing? But if God's telling you to do it, what are you doing? You're quitting your job and you're starting a engaged deal.
Starting a ministry with no money? Yeah. It's gonna be great.
Kind of like Paul did and Jesus did, and a lot of people did over the years. So in the episode on calling, you say, there's a couple of quotes I like a lot that you said, and I want to talk about a couple of them. The calling God has placed on your life is for his glory, not your own. What do you mean by that?
So there's a couple things that you can look at. I think that when you're called by God to look into what he's asking you to do, what are you doing it for? Because if you're doing it for yourself and for your own glory, it's going to fail 9 times out of 10, maybe 10 times out of 10. But if you're doing it and it's specifically God, he's leading and directing you, and you're saying, hey, the only reason I'm going to jump in there and do something like this is because I want God to be glorified in everything that I'm doing. I want his name to be known. Because if that was to me, I'm like, he wouldn't be calling you to do something crazy if it was just all for selfish reasons. He's calling you because he wants people to know who he is and how awesome of a God he is and how great he is, and everything that we've done success-wise or failure-wise. There's a reason the Bible says that we will exalt in our tribulations, knowing that tribulations bring about perseverance, proven character, and proven character, hope. And there's a reason that God is saying, hey, this is going to be a challenging time, but I'm going to get the glory for it, because you're going to face, you're going to grow in so many different ways, so many different opportunities to get better. And that for me, when I look at that, if I'm not doing this for his glory, then why am I doing it? And that's the purpose, for his name to be known.
Because if you're doing it for yourself, it's just not the same. And it's just something about doing it when you know God is in it and God's with you in it.
Yeah.
And if you're doing it just for yourself, well, we've seen the consequences of that many, many times with people in ministry, and it just doesn't work. So the other one I like is you don't control your calling. What do you mean by
that? Yeah. There's another verse, Romans 8:28, and it talks about, we know that God is a popular verse, that God causes all things to work for the good to those who love them, to those who are called according to his purpose. So much of that is we get mixed up in like, oh, it's for the good of those who love God, but we don't always understand what God's good for us is. We think that it's our good for what God is, and we're going to get it. And people need to understand that when you're following hard after God and you're following after who he is, you're doing it for what God's good in your life and how it's going to make you better because of that. And that doesn't always mean easy. So that's part of that. Read that one more time to me, though, again.
You don't control something else. You don't control your calling.
Yeah. And so if you're doing it for the love, for God to help get you better, you're not doing it. He's going to lead and direct that calling that he's placed in your life and on you. And you're not going, there's nothing you can do to resist. Like we talked earlier, like there's nothing you can do to stop God pursuing and moving and saying, hey, this is what I want for you. And at the end of the day, that's where your mindset should be at, is it's what he's directing you towards and not what you're directing yourself to. And I don't think you can get away from it at the end of the day.
No, I agree. And, I think I can remember times though, when doing what I thought God wanted me to do. And then I think, I've got this idea and I kind of want to go this way with it. And God says no. And I have to realize I got to wait for him to direct me. I think sometimes it's hard for us to not get ahead of God or try to get ahead of God, because we never do get ahead of him, but we kind of think we are. And so we think, okay, this is going good. And thanks God for your help. And now I'll take over and we'll see you, sometime. And that just didn't work. I think for me and you both, it's a continual day after day after day seeking him, making sure that I'm on track with where he wants me to go. And the funny thing about it is it works.
Yeah. Would you agree at the same time? It does work 100%, but you're not always going to get the results that you think you're supposed to be getting when it comes to that. And so many people, I think, and myself included, when we jump into this, you're kind of having some visions of what this is possibly going to look like at the beginning. And then God kind of has a tendency to flip that on the head, because my expectations were much different than his expectations. And as soon as I started working on getting those lined up, it made it a lot easier. Not that it wasn't hard or challenging, but it was a lot easier. And so you have to understand your perspective versus God's and put those two together and understand it's ultimately God's perspective that you're running with. But it's easy to fall. It's easy to screw those up, if you will, twist them up a little bit.
No, I think that's a really, really good point. It's almost like when he called me to Awesome Marriage, I to start that, I had no idea. And so we started a Facebook page, and this was great. That's what it's going to be. And then I think God he doesn't tell us everything all at once, probably because we would run or something.
Oh, yeah.
I can't do that. There's no way. But it's kind of like there's a series of doors, and he opens one for you, and you go through that, and you get a little comfortable, and then God opens the next one, and the next one, and the next one. It doesn't open them all at one time, and so I think that I think it's just the way God knows us so well and knows how to lead us so well, and when we follow him like that, we're going to be successful in his eyes, and that's really all that counts anyway.
That's all that matters. We wouldn't have jumped had I known what 2020 was going to hold. I would not have taken that step of faith. So you're right. That's a great point, a great illustration, and it's something that's absolutely true.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, today, what's something that you're excited about?
I'm excited about the fact that we have 2 events coming up. One, a marriage retreat, and the other one's the Engaged event, which will be our 14th. Can you believe that we've already done 14 of those things?
Wow, that's amazing.
It's crazy. But I think I get excited. As exciting as those are coming up, sometimes the unknown and what is God going to do, that I get excited about more than just necessarily having an event. Because I don't always know what they're going to look like, but God always shows up and and works in ways that I don't expect. So I get excited about that. That might sound like a cliche Christian answer, but it truly is. Like, it's all right, God, what are you going to do today? What are you going to do with this? How are you going to make this person's life different? How are you going to, that's what I get excited about.
Yeah. And I think thinking back on some where I was there live with you, and just the people that, things that you didn't have any idea what was going on in those couples' lives that were there because they were engaged, and you see God work in it, and you see God, some transparency happen and some openness, and all of a sudden you see some healing begin to happen and some big steps. And I think that's the joy of being in ministry, is when you're able to throw something out there and then God does something with it. And sometimes he does something that's totally different than you thought it was going to be. I can't believe somebody heard that. That's not why I said that, but they heard it. God had them hear it the way he wanted them to hear it. And that's pretty cool.
And we've talked about this on the podcast, is I have a hard time. When I started, I measured success in a certain way. And I had a friend of mine ask me, he goes, how does God measure success, Jeff? Because I'm like, Pastor, we haven't got this number. We don't have these many people. Like, I want to see this happen. I want to see that happen. And that's success to me. And he goes, that's fantastic. It'll be great. But he said, how does God measure that success? And it's really flipped. And we've talked about that on our podcast. It's like, what as men, as we're looking at how do we measure success? So many times we compare it to what the world says is success, as opposed to comparing it to what God says is success. And as soon as I started doing that, it really relieved a tremendous amount of stress on me and my heart.
Absolutely. That's cool. So if people want to find you, what's the best place to find out about the Engaged Life and all that kind of good stuff?
They can go to the engagedlife.co, because we're so cool as an organization. We left off the M of .com and just went .co. That's how cool it is. So the engagedlife.co. And I think you've got a couple things on there from of us as well, or a couple things of Awesome Marriage on the website as well. So, yeah.
That is, it's great. It's fun doing the podcast with you. It's fun connecting today, and hope people, the events are both in Oklahoma City. Is that right?
They are both of them October 22nd for the Replenish Retreat, which is our marriage retreat. And then the Engaged event is on October 30th. So just a week later.
And so people find out all about that on the engagedlife.co.
They can. .co.
And sign up and all that stuff. It just kills me. It just only you would be the first one that I know to use .co.
I'll tell you right now, I despise it. I do not like it to say, but that was what was available at the time. And so eventually, I feel like I've heard pastors speak. They didn't like their .tv was a big problem. Like they hated .tv, but what that was available. Same thing for us. Like at some point in time, that'll change. Right now, it's what we have available, and we're thankful for it.
We did the same thing with Awesome Marriage. We didn't get the .com on Awesome Marriage till a few years into it, when someone had it and was willing to sell it to us. So
yeah. So it's hope. There's hope, then, is what you're saying.
There's hope. Thanks for joining me today. Love what you and Amanda do, and thank you guys for watching us.
I appreciate you, Dr.